Most of us don't think twice about tossing something in the fridge or hitting a button on the microwave. But out in Amish country, where electricity isn't a given and every season matters, food isn't just eaten. It's preserved with purpose. These communities have held onto methods the modern world has nearly abandoned. No plastic wrap, no high-tech gadgets, and definitely no deep freezers. Just raw, honest techniques passed down for generations. Techniques that still work, and in some cases, work better than what we use today. In this video, we're diving into 8 of the most effective, time-tested Amish food-saving techniques that most people today have either never heard of or completely forgotten. You won't find gimmicks here, just real methods that keep food fresh, safe, and flavorful for months, sometimes longer, without ever plugging anything in. Some of these might surprise you, some might even challenge how you think about food storage. But every one of them proves that the old ways aren't outdated. We've just stopped paying attention. Number 1. Ice houses. Long before refrigerators ever became part of daily life, Amish communities had already figured out an incredibly efficient way to preserve perishable food using nothing but ice and smart design. Ice houses weren't some minor outbuilding tucked away for emergencies. They were a vital part of food survival, especially through the warmer months when spoilage could happen fast. These buildings were typically constructed with thick wooden walls, sometimes double insulated, and often built partially underground or into hillsides to take advantage of naturally cooler earth temperatures. The goal was simple: trap winter cold and stretch it deep into summer. Every winter, Amish families would head out to frozen ponds or nearby rivers and cut massive blocks of ice by hand using long saws. It was hard work, cold work, and not exactly glamorous, but they knew the payoff would be worth it. The ice blocks, sometimes weighing over 100 pounds each, were then loaded onto sleds or wagons and hauled to the ice house. Once inside, the blocks were stacked tightly together, layer after layer, and packed with sawdust or straw in between. This wasn't just to fill gaps. It created insulation that dramatically slowed the melting process. A well-packed ice house could keep ice solid until late August or even early September, depending on how often it was accessed. Inside the ice house, perishables were stored in wooden crates or metal bins directly on top of or near the ice. Milk jugs, wheels of cheese, even whole sides of pork could be rotated through to keep them from spoiling. Families would often assign 1 or 2 people to manage access, because opening the door too often could compromise the internal temperature. The Amish understood that consistency and planning mattered. Every time the door opened, heat got in, so everything from entry time to what items needed chilling was thought out in advance. This wasn't some throwback gimmick. This was cold storage done with surgical precision and old-world grit. Number 2. Crocs and Stonewear. In a world overflowing with flimsy plastic containers and vacuum-sealed everything, the Amish continue to rely on something far more grounded, literally. Heavy stoneware Crocs have been a staple in their kitchens for generations, not just because of tradition, but because these vessels offer a natural, reliable, and long-lasting solution for food preservation. Built thick and sturdy, these Crocs are made from clay and fired at high temperatures, giving them a dense, cool interior that remains stable no matter what the weather outside is doing. Their weight isn't a flaw, it's what keeps them anchored, especially in cellars or pantries where temperature and airflow are key. These Crocs aren't just containers, they're working tools that actively support fermentation and long-term storage. When preserving foods like cucumbers, beets, cabbage, or even eggs, Amish cooks understand that the Crock does more than just hold. It protects. The semi-porous nature of stoneware allows for just a touch of breathability. This is crucial for live fermentation processes like making sauerkraut or pickled vegetables. It keeps gases from building up while preventing contaminants from sneaking in. Some of the more specialized Crocs even have water-sealed lids. Clever designs where a moat around the lid is filled with water, forming a natural barrier that keeps air out but lets pressure escape. Inside these Crocs, food is often packed in layers. A mixture of salt and vinegar for some recipes or sugar for fruit-based preserves. Nothing is random. Everything is measured, pressed, and weighted down using flat stones or ceramic weights to ensure an even brine coverage. Once sealed and placed in a consistently cool location like a basement or pantry shelf, these Crocs can sit undisturbed for weeks or months. And when it comes time to open them, what's inside isn't just preserved, it's transformed. The flavor is deeper, richer, and more alive than anything from a store-bought jar. These vessels aren't just functional, they're generational. Many Amish families pass them down, and with proper care, a good Croc can last a lifetime or more. Number 3, dry cellar hanging. Among the many clever food-saving methods used by the Amish, dry cellar hanging stands out for its simplicity and silent efficiency. At first glance, it might seem like an old-fashioned way to store things, but when you really understand how it works, you realize there's nothing accidental about it. This isn't about just tossing vegetables into a cool place and hoping for the best. It's about methodical preparation, precise conditions, and a deep understanding of how each type of produce behaves once it's harvested. In Amish households, once the harvest is done and crops like garlic, onions, and certain squash are pulled from the field, the first step isn't storage, it's curing. Curing is essential. It allows the outer layers of the produce to dry and form a natural protective barrier that resists moisture, pests, and rot. Garlic and onions, for instance, are gently cleaned of dirt but never washed. Their stalks are braided by hand, often in long ropes, and then left to hang in airy, shaded spaces until the greens are completely desiccated. Only then are they moved to a dry corner of the cellar or attic, where the temperature stays steady and the humidity stays low. This kind of hanging isn't done randomly. The Amish are very specific about how and where things are placed. Airflow is crucial, so produce is suspended from ceiling beams, hooks, or wooden racks to keep air circulating on all sides. Larger vegetables like butternut squash or even small pumpkins might be stored in netted fabric slings, spaced apart so they don't touch or bruise. Everything hangs upside down to encourage any residual moisture to escape naturally, helping to prevent rot and mold. This technique doesn't require electricity, plastic, or high-tech gadgets. Just patience, clean air, and careful hands. It's a testament to how resourcefulness, when paired with respect for nature's rhythms, can keep food fresh and flavorful deep into the off-season. Number 4, root clamping. At first mention, root clamping might sound like something invented in a survivalist manual, but for the Amish, it's a time-tested and deeply practical method of preserving vegetables straight from the soil. When cellar shelves are full or space indoors is limited, they turn to the ground itself as a reliable ally. The process begins just as the weather starts to cool and harvest winds down. Rather than rushing to process every root crop for canning or drying, families will set aside a portion specifically for clamping, selecting only the best specimens without bruises, cracks, or blemishes, because anything less could compromise the whole clamp. A shallow pit is dug, not too deep, just enough to shelter the produce below frost level but above groundwater. At the bottom, a thick bed of straw, dried leaves, or even pine needles is laid to create a buffer between the earth and the vegetables. Then comes the layering. Turnips, beets, rutabagas, carrots, and even heads of cabbage are placed carefully inside, never piled carelessly. There's a rhythm to the placement, wide at the base, slightly tapered at the top, forming a mound that resembles a small hill or burial site in the middle of a field. Once filled, the entire structure is covered again with more straw, followed by a final layer of soil to lock everything in. This natural insulation regulates the internal temperature, keeping it consistently cool and protecting the contents from frost, wind, and moisture swings. Some clamps are built above ground too, especially in areas prone to poor drainage. In these cases, Amish families stack the vegetables in a conical shape and cover them with insulating layers, sometimes even using wooden frames for extra support. The beauty of root clamping lies in its simplicity and independence from modern tools. There are no jars, no electricity, no chemicals, just earth, straw, and patience. Done right, this method can keep vegetables crisp and edible well into the spring, long after the snow has come and gone. It's an ingenious system hiding in plain sight, quietly defying time and temperature with nothing but the ground beneath our feet. Number 5. Buttermilk brining. Tucked away in quiet Amish kitchens is a meat preservation method so simple and rich in tradition that it almost feels forgotten by the modern world. Buttermilk brining. Unlike heavily salted curing or smoking processes that aim for long-term storage, this technique is designed for short-term preservation when fresh meat needs to be held without refrigeration, especially in the days immediately following a butchering. The process begins with the freshest cuts of poultry, usually chicken or turkey, and occasionally rabbit. Once the meat is cleaned and portioned, it's immediately placed into large ceramic or enamel containers and submerged in a carefully prepared brine made with cultured buttermilk, coarse salt, and a blend of spices that vary depending on the household. Buttermilk, with its mild acidity and active cultures, plays multiple roles here. It not only preserves the meat by inhibiting bacterial growth in cooler conditions, but it also tenderizes the muscle fibers, resulting in a texture that's noticeably softer once cooked. Salt enhances that preservation effect, and the spices, often a mix of crushed garlic, mustard seed, black pepper, or horseradish, give the meat a depth of flavor that's hard to replicate with dry rubs or store-bought marinades. The meat sits fully submerged, typically weighted down with a plate or small lid, and stored in a cool location like a cellar, porch, or unheated pantry. If the temperatures outside are cold enough, the brine acts as a sort of natural refrigeration system, extending the meat's usable life by several days, sometimes up to a full week. This method is especially valuable during busy times when the Amish are processing large batches of poultry and need to pace their cooking, preserving, and distributing schedules. It buys them time, not by freezing or drying, but through chemistry, culture, and careful timing. The end result is meat that holds beautifully, cooks evenly, and tastes like it's been marinating for days. Because it has. While it's not a technique meant to last through winter, it's the perfect bridge between butchering and table, offering a flavorful pause before longer-term preservation kicks in. Number 6. Molasses preservation. Back when refined sugar was rare and expensive, molasses wasn't just a baking ingredient. It was a kitchen essential with serious preserving power. Among Amish families, especially those in rural areas with limited access to commercial canning supplies, molasses became a trusted ally in keeping fruit fresh, flavorful, and shelf-stable. This wasn't a matter of sweetening for taste alone. It was about using the dense, mineral-rich syrup as a natural preservative, capable of blocking bacterial growth and extending the life of food well beyond harvest season. The process often began during late summer or early fall, when fruits like apples, pears, cherries, and berries were at their peak. Instead of letting excess produce spoil or relying entirely on drying or canning, Amish cooks would peel, slice, and simmer the fruit directly in boiling molasses. The bubbling mixture would darken and thicken as the fruit released its juices, and the molasses would envelop every piece with a sticky, protective coating. Sometimes a dash of vinegar or lemon juice was added to balance the sweetness and give the finished product a deeper, more complex flavor. Depending on the family recipe, warming spices like cinnamon, cloves, or allspice might be added as well, turning the whole concoction into something that felt equal parts preserve and dessert. Once the mixture reached the right consistency, thick, rich, and deeply aromatic, it would be ladled into sterilized stoneware or glass jars and sealed while hot. These jars were then stored in cool cellars where they could sit untouched for months, even a year or more, without spoiling. The sugar content in the molasses created an environment where bacteria struggled to survive, making it an effective alternative to traditional jamming that didn't rely on commercial pectin or added preservatives. When opened, the preserved fruit inside remained soft and syrupy, perfect for serving over cornbread, pancakes, or alongside roasted meats. Even the leftover syrup, dark, sweet, and fruit-infused, became a prized ingredient, used in glazes or drizzled over fresh bread. It wasn't just preservation, it was an elegant solution born out of necessity, flavor, and resourcefulness. Number 7. Layered grain storage. Among the most practical and disciplined aspects of Amish food-saving practices is the way they manage their grain supply. For families who depend on the harvest not just to bake bread, but to feed livestock, make cereals, and trade within the community, protecting grains like wheat, oats, corn, and barley isn't just smart. It's survival. And rather than leaning on synthetic chemicals, industrial bags, or high-tech equipment, the Amish rely on a method that's both low-tech and impressively effective: layered grain storage with natural insect deterrents. The process starts long before the grain even hits the storage barrel. It begins in the field during harvest, when grains are allowed to dry completely, often using open-air structures or old-fashioned drying racks. Once moisture levels are low enough to prevent mold or spoilage, the grains are cleaned by hand or through simple sieving tools to remove debris, husks, and broken particles. What goes into storage is clean, dry, and carefully selected. The storage containers themselves are often handcrafted: thick wooden bins, barrels, or crates built to keep the grain shielded from temperature swings and humidity. These aren't just containers, they're a part of the system. Inside, the grain is packed in layers, and between each layer, the Amish place materials that repel insects, but are completely natural and food-safe. Bay leaves are a favorite due to their strong scent that many bugs can't stand. Dried mint and lavender are also common, along with black walnut leaves, which are crushed and spread lightly without mixing directly into the grain. These natural barriers help discourage weevils, moths, and other pests without introducing any toxins or chemicals. The bins are usually sealed with wooden lids or breathable but tightly woven cloths that keep air circulation to a minimum, while still allowing moisture to escape if needed. These storage units are kept elevated, either on wooden pallets or stone blocks, to prevent contact with ground moisture and reduce the risk of mold or rodents. In many homes, the bins are tucked into corners of dry barns, attics, or secondary storage buildings, where temperatures stay consistent year-round. Because of how methodical and natural this technique is, grains can be safely stored for a year or longer without spoilage. Whether it's whole oats waiting to be rolled, wheat meant for grinding, or cornmeal that needs to stay fresh through winter, the layered system gives families peace of mind and real results, all without a single wire, plug, or synthetic additive. Number 8. Boiled syrup sealing. At first glance, boiled syrup sealing might appear to be a basic home kitchen technique, but in Amish tradition, it's a highly tuned process that balances preservation, sterilization, and flavor all in one swift movement. What sets this method apart is not just how it's done, but when it's done. Timing is everything. The process begins once the fruits or vegetables are already prepared and simmered, whether they're relishes, stewed rhubarb, sweet and spiced apples, or even savory pickled items like green tomatoes. With the food still hot and fresh from the stove, Amish cooks prepare a concentrated syrup, a thick, bubbling liquid made from fruit juice reductions, wildflower honey, or sometimes a blend of vinegar spiced with cloves, cinnamon, or mustard seed. This syrup isn't just for taste. Its role is functional. As it boils, it reaches a temperature high enough to sterilize and kill off bacteria or airborne yeast that might otherwise cause spoilage. Once the food is packed into clean jars, often stoneware or heavy glass, the boiling syrup is immediately poured over the contents, covering everything and pushing out any lingering air bubbles. Within moments, the tops are sealed tightly, traditionally with wax and cloth, or in more modern setups with metal canning lids. As the jars cool, the contracting heat inside creates a vacuum that locks the seal in place and protects the contents from contamination. But the real genius is the syrup itself. That dense, sticky top layer forms a natural barrier that's hard for oxygen or mold to penetrate. And depending on how it's made, whether with tangy apple cider vinegar, raw honey, or elderberry juice, it actually adds flavor over time. What's stored in that jar doesn't just sit idle, it continues to evolve, often tasting even better after a few months. There's no freezer, no electricity, and no industrial preservatives, just a perfectly timed pour, heat, and an age-old instinct for how nature can be harnessed to protect and enhance food. This method stands as a quiet masterpiece of Amish kitchencraft, rooted in repetition and refined by generations who learned how to make every drop count.